right, moonwalking my way into science today. We are going to talk about setting up experiments, independent, dependent variables, controls, blah, 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 blah. It's technical talk for cool stuff that you're gonna pay attention to. Kids staying at home, quarantining, binge watching stuff. That ends now. Put down your Fruity Pebbles and pay attention. We ready? Okay. So, what we're going to be doing, you see if there's a bunch of assignments, and we're going to be talking about how to identify the independent variable, how to set up a control experiment, how to make sure that you do everything correct. So let's start with some definitions first. So a controlled experiment, one variable is changed at a time. The other variables are controlled or remain constant. So when we are testing something, we have to make sure that we have all the other variables controlled and we have only one variable that is different. So let me explain what that is. So let's say that I want to find out if I can run faster in Air Force Ones than barefoot.
Good morning, USIS Middle School. Mustang University for new teachers will be starting in 5 minutes in the Media Center. See you soon. Bye.
Don't know who I am. All right, so if I want to find out if I run faster in Air Force Ones versus without shoes at all, basically my independent variable is the Air Force Ones, correct? Because that's what I'm testing, that's what I want to find out, correct? Or if I want to find out if a plant will grow taller with fertilizer than without, that's what I'm testing, that's my independent variable, right? The fertilizer. I'll explain it more, we'll get into it. You're like, what? I'm going back to my Fruity Pebbles, this is done. No, it's not, it's important. Because these experiments are often used in businesses. If you own a nursery, or if you own some sort of product and you want to know which one's best to use, you can save a lot of money by conducting this experiment on your own and finding out where to invest your money in, right? So anyway, we'll talk more about it. So we have the controlled experiment is one variable is changed. So you're testing one thing, only one. I'm not testing, well, maybe do I run faster in Air Force Ones as well as a string bikini, correct? Gross, I'm not paying for the therapy. So you can only test one thing, because if I do run faster, is it the shoes or is it an aerodynamic but yet sleek and very beautiful bikini? We don't know. We'll talk more about that too. So what you need to do in a controlled experiment, you need two groups. You need your experimental group and your control group. So the experimental group shows the effect of the variable being tested. It has the independent variable, it's what you're testing. So the experimental group has the independent variable. So if I wanted to find out if fertilizer affects plant growth, I'm gonna have a plant that gets fertilizer. The fertilizer is the independent variable, it's what we're testing, okay? The control group is identical to this group, except there's no fertilizer, there's no independent variable. All right, so if you're trying to figure out which one's the control, which one's the experimental group has the independent variable. It'll be the one thing that's different between the two groups. So if there's one thing that's different and it's part of one group, that's the experimental group. But why do we have a control group or a comparison group? Well, let's just say, well, really, how do we know if the fertilizer really works if we don't have anything to compare it to? So I could put, if I just have one plant, I put fertilizer on the plant, I'm like, yeah, it grew, but how do I know if it grew better than without fertilizer? Or what if I'm spending $15 on a bag of fertilizer and only grew 2 inches more than without? You'll find out that that's a waste of money. So what you need is a comparison group. That will be, you'll have one plant that gets the fertilizer, and then you have another plant that won't. All right? We'll talk about that in a little more detail over there. And so that way, at the end of the experiment, you can compare the height of the two plants and see if the fertilizer worked. If it's 4 feet taller than the other plant, we might be able to draw the conclusion that yes, the fertilizer was a significant difference. And if you're a nursery, you can usually sell a plant that's bigger for more money. So anyway, so let's move on to the independent variable. So the independent variable is the variable that is changed. It's what's manipulated by the scientists, right? It's what you're testing, right? If I want to test, if I want to test the, whether a, oh gosh, I use the sneakers. If I want to test whether how high if a tennis ball bounces higher than a baseball, that's just that my independent variable is the type of ball, right? Because I'm gonna have a tennis ball, a baseball, and I'm gonna drop them both, and I'm gonna see what, right? So my independent variable is the ball, and the dependent variable will be the height. I'll explain that in a second, right? So your independent variable is what you're testing. The dependent variable is the results, the data of the experiment. It is what's observed or measured in response to testing the IV. Basically, it's your data, all right? If I want to see if cooking an egg, if I want to make a hard-boiled egg, all right, that's when you put it in water and heat it till the inside turns solid. If I want to make a hard-boiled egg, will it turn solid faster at a higher temperature or a lower temperature, right? So the independent variable is the different temperatures, right? Because that's what's different. I'm trying to figure out if temperature affects how fast an egg turns hard. All right, so the dependent variable would be the time it took for the egg, the results. How long did it take at 400 degrees? How long did it take at 200 degrees, if it happened at all? Make sense? So the different temperatures is the independent variable, and then the results is how long it took for the egg to hard boil. Make sense? We're gonna be practicing this. Let's try another example. I know you kids are like, oh my God, Mr. Moore, you are amazing. I can't help it. All right, let's see what we got here. All right, so let's try an example 1. So if I give a plant fertilizer, it will grow taller than a plant without fertilizer. Well, it sounds familiar, correct? So that's my hypothesis. Is it testable? Sure is, right? So how do I set up the experiment? All right, so I need at least 2 plants. Now, granted, we'd probably want, if we had money, we'd do 100 plants. Because remember, the more you test something, the more you're likely to eliminate luck or any type of anomalies or any of the weird results that might happen, right? So you would need 2 plants. 1 plant gets the fertilizer. That's my experimental group because the independent variable is the fertilizer. It's what we're trying to find out. It's what we're testing, right? The control group or my comparison group is just a regular plant, right? Without fertilizer, because we need to know if this plant, if the fertilizer really works, and if it does, how well does it work, right? So what other things that you need? So what you also need in an experiment like this is constants. So you can only change one variable, meaning that we can only, in this particular scenario, we could only have fertilizer be different between the 2 groups. If we do fertilizer for this plant and then maybe add extra water, now when the experiment's over, it's completely invalid. Why? Good guess. The reason is that we don't know now what's driving our results because we have 2 independent variables. We have the presence of fertilizer and more water. So when the results come in and the plant's this tall, we don't know whether it was the fertilizer or the water that was driving all this growth, or maybe a combination of both. So we have to start over and do it again. All right? So you can only have 1 independent variable. Everything else among the 2 plants must be the same. All right? They need to be the same species of plant. Different plants grow at different rates. They need to be the same starting height as best as you can, or they need to be as close as they can to each other's height, right? Same size plant, same size pot. The size of the pot, the more space the plant has, the faster it will grow, right? Or the more it will grow. You need to give it the same amount of water. They need to be in the same a room at the same temperature. They need to get the same amount of sun at the same time of day. Everything between these 2 plants must be the same. Any variation outside of the independent variable invalidates the whole experiment. Then, at the end of X amount of time, we measure the height of the plants, and the height of the plant is the dependent variable, right? So independent variable is the fertilizer, dependent variable is the height of the plants. Questions? So what we're testing is if fertilizer works. That's your independent variable. The dependent variable is, well, how well did it work? Did it grow? Did it not grow? Right? That's your data. It's the results. Now let me give you a few more examples. Look at example 2. Now some of these will give you clues, verbal clues as to what the dependent and independent variable are. Remember, so think about dependent. If I'm independent, I'm Miss Independent. I don't need you. I'm different. I'm by myself. I'm the only one here, right? So find that. If you find that, the thing that's different between the groups, now you found your independent variable. Then you have the dependent variable. Oh, woe is me. I have no self-esteem. I am not worthy to be tested. I need somebody else. I'm totally dependent on somebody else. That's your dependent variable. If it is dependent on something else, right, it is then the dependent variable. And then once you find one, the other thing is what you're missing. Make sense? But you can also use clues. Affect, right? If you affect me, that means I'm dependent on you. If you come to class, finally come back to class and say, great, I prefer to be quarantining, this place sucks, my little feelings will be hurt. I'll be in my corner, I'll be crying, right? So what you said affects me, meaning that I am dependent on you. Does that make sense? So look for words like affects. If something affects something else, this is dependent upon this. All right, so do different tire treads affect the braking distance? What's your independent variable? What are we testing? We're trying to find, what are we trying to find out? We're trying to find out if you put different tires on your car, will it affect how you brake? So independent variable, this is what we're testing. We're testing different tires. Dependent variable is the results, right? That's gotta be your braking distance. What would be a constant in this experiment? Well, you should be using the same car. You should be going the same speed when you brake. You should be having the same driver, because any type of weight could change the braking distance. You need to have them, both tests need to be, or all the tests need to be done on the same pavement. They all need to be dry, or they all need to be, the same conditions, the same weather conditions. They should be done, if they're all in the morning, they should be all done in the morning, and not because the heat's different, and it causes the pavement to change at 9 in the morning versus the intense heat of the day. Make sense? So everything needs to be constant. Look for clues. The example 3 is super obvious, extremely obvious, epically obvious. Sure you can see it. The time it takes to run a mile depends on a person's running speed. This one is screaming, look at me, right? The time it takes to run a mile depends on a person's running speed. What's your independent variable? And sometimes if you can't answer it, think about it. A person's running speed. So it's time. So if I'm going to, I could run across the room at a sprint and have somebody count. So let's just say it's 4 seconds, because I'm Usain Bolt, right? So let's say I alter my running speed, and maybe I'm just doing this and it takes me 8 seconds. So what's the independent variable? My running speed. The time, my running speed determines my time. So that means, or my time depends on how fast I'm running. Running speed, time it takes. Constant, same distance, same person, same type of day, same conditions. I can't be running one with a wind in my face and then run again with the wind in my back. Everything needs to be the same. Same shoes, same everything, same outfit, right? Should be run right after. I shouldn't go run the first one and then go ahead and go to, Golden Corral and fill up on 1,700 pounds of vein artery hardening foods. You know what I'm saying? So, so look for the clues. All right, there's usually clues, but sometimes they're not. And then you got to ask yourself, what's being tested here? What's the result? Look for the relationship. Something has to be dependent on something else. You have to do something, or change something, and that change will drive something else, right? Or if I want to know something, look for the differences, right? Look for something that you're testing. All right, so you just need practice. So there's a bunch of stuff in Google Classroom. Shoot me a message, an email if you need me, and we'll get you all straight. So for those at home, get well, stay safe, come back as quick as you can, because it's just not the same without you here. All right, see ya.